and then let's go back to the fight, you know.
Yeah, it's like recharge. It's just like recharging a battery is what it's like. Is what you're doing. You're recharging everything. Well, we had Navy nurses in the aid stations at the base back in the rear, but
Nice.
here what happened in country, where and I think it's happening over in Afghanistan, Iraq now. We weren't always out of harm's way in the rear. We lost sometimes as many people in the base camp because we used to get barrages of rockets come into our rear. They had train cars that they used to push up the mountains with rocket launchers on, and they wouldn't use mortars. They used rockets. They sent a barrage of 100 at a time, and
Really?
122 millimeter, 140 rockets, and they'd blow bunkers right out of the ground. I mean,
Wow.
we had a lot of incoming rounds in our base camps after they learned where the camps were, where they learned where our rear supply areas were. They started getting hit too. Okay, so there was just as much harm's way there as there were when you were out on a patrol.
Hey, Gunny, how often did y'all change those locations? Were they changed, those rear locations at all, or is it something they were just fixed?
Well, they had to change them after so many months. They had to start changing them because of the impact of the artillery and the rockets coming in. I mean, they didn't change the actual location, but they moved troops and supplies away from them sometimes. Okay.
Well, you know, I want to shift a little bit out from war for a little bit, if you don't mind. Let's go to Japan. Tell us about your service in Japan. Did you mentioned Bruce Lee on our previous show?
Well, that was in Hong Kong. That was in Hong Kong, China.
Okay, China. Let's talk a little bit about the Master, Johnny. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, I was there. I went there on R&R. I went there on R&R to Kowloon Province, and that's when I was had the pleasure of meeting Bruce Lee. He was young then, but I also, the Chinese culture is probably one of the best cultures. Well, this is back then. I'm not talking about what's going on now.
Sure.
But the Chinese culture and the Chinese families are one of the most unique cultures that an American person could ever learn about. I mean, they would take us in. We were there on R&R, like a mini vacation. Okay, I guess nowadays they get R&Rs too. But you could pick anywhere. They had a list of places you could go. You could go to Australia. You could go to Hawaii, Hong Kong, China, Thailand, the Philippines, a lot of other places. I chose because I got 2 R&Rs because I was there 2 times. I went to Hong Kong and then I went to Thailand. Oh. And I'm just families in China were so friendly, and like, you know, you'd stay at a hotel there, but you meet people and they take you back. They introduce you to their families. You'd have dinner with them. Right. They'd eat like 12, 14 course meal over there. And back then, a big thing, a lot of us guys, we had special tailored suits made in Hong Kong. They'd send them back. You had to give them your address at home. You'd pay for them, and it would be back home when you got there, when you got back from Vietnam.
All right, okay. So tell us about those suits. Now, what in the world? You're getting a suit so that when you get home you can look sharp. Is that what it's about?
Yeah, it was. They had these special. It was back then we had these real high collar suits. This was back in the '60s, and then the buttons that you buttoned on them, they had the same kind of fabric as your suit was made of to match the suit, not the kind of buttons that are on suits now.
Wow.
These had the buttons, like a 4 button down the front, and the buttons matched the material on your suit.
That is awesome, Gunny. Now tell me, Gunny, you still got that suit in your closet somewhere?
No, I don't. I gave that to. I gave both of those to my first son from my first marriage.
Oh, that's awesome.
They wouldn't fit me. They wouldn't fit me now. Back then I had a 27-inch waist, man. It wouldn't fit me now.
Oh my gosh.
But it's just the camaraderie with your troops, and not just in the countries. Like when I come back from Vietnam, my duty station, I was stationed at Quantico, Virginia.
Okay.
I'm sure you know where Quantico is. That's where the basic school is and the FBI Academy.
Yes, sir.
The basic school is where officers went after they got commissioned from the Navy and the Marine Corps to learn combat AIT weapons training. I was a senior NCIC at the basic school. I was stationed there like almost 6 years, I think 6.5 years. Because I grew up in PA. I used to go home, be able to go home Thursday night, drive home, and I didn't have to come back till Monday afternoon because I was a senior NCIC. But we were hard on those young lieutenants because of what we saw in Vietnam. Back then, it was all E5s and E4s. We were all the combat instructors out there on the ranges for everything at the basic school. We knew what happened in Vietnam.
You have to lay the groundwork. You have to set them up so that they can be successful. And, as hard as you may have been on them, all you did was help them survive. That's what you were doing. So I think you did your job.
Right. We told them what we had saw when we were there. And we put some of them on the place. Some of them had chips on their shoulders. A lot of the officers, and I'm not saying this to say anything against any officer in any branch of the military, but a lot of these were rich kids. They think they could get away with anything. Well, we didn't let it happen because we saw what some of them young lieutenants that came from that background could have cost people lives in Vietnam.
Right.
And we said, we're not going to let that happen. And we told them, we told them right when we lecture, we had a lecture every morning before we started doing anything. They'd be in the bleachers. We had a few 5 minutes, about 5-10 minutes each one of us. The instructors would lecture a little bit on what they thought was important. And my biggest thing was I put them on the spot. I said, listen, you guys are here to learn because you can't learn everything out of a book.
That's right.
War isn't controlled by a book. And we saw guys try to run our platoons by a book when we were there. And we said, listen, it doesn't work. So you know what? If you don't pay attention to us, and I meant all the instructors in all phases of the training, you might not make it home, and you might cost some enlisted guys their chance to get home. So, we made it sound real. I mean, and it was real. It was real to me because I saw what happened to guys that didn't listen. There's nothing, I don't care what branch of the military you're in or how long you're in, there's never something you can't learn from another individual that's standing aside of you. So you better open your ears and close your mouth and open your eyes and pay attention. That's one thing I learned the whole time I was in the military. There's knowledge is something you never get enough of.
Well, it's so true, Gunny, and let's talk about that a little bit. So you talk about knowledge, and we talk about your martial arts experience. So when you met Bruce Lee and you got to go learn and practice martial arts in China, I agree with you on the Asian culture in general. It's just unbelievable. They're great people. I love it. I think it's unbelievable. I think us Americans can learn a lot from the respect that Asians have. But when you talk about constantly learning, that's exactly what you do in martial arts. Is that not correct?
Yes, but I didn't know this. I didn't learn martial arts from Bruce Lee. I learned from Master Shimabuku, but I got to meet Bruce Lee when I was in Hong Kong, when I was in China. Bruce Lee was just young and a new instructor back then, but I got to meet him. I got to visit the school where he trained people, and it was unreal. So he was an unreal individual. He was like down to earth because he was very open to spreading his knowledge. He came to the United States to teach, and he was blackballed from the Chinese martial arts cultures because he wanted to spread his knowledge to the Western world. And I saw when he was being shaped into the martial artist he has, and you think the military's hard on people? These guys would train for 6-7 hours a day in the martial arts in Hong Kong. They didn't have hour classes like we have here in the U.S. or hour and 45-minute classes.
It's a lifestyle.
These guys would be kicking for an hour and a half and punching and doing. I'm talking about all day, Josh, and that's how their culture is. And the Japanese are the same way. Not just the Chinese, it seems like all the Asian cultures and individuals, they seem to train. They train just like they live their life. They dedicate their whole life to it.
Right.
And that's what really opened my eyes about things when I got to visit that and see that. I said, well, we only have a class or so. We'd have like 3 classes a week when I was at Okinawa. And, you know, and even when you come back, if you continue your martial arts training, you might go to a class every day, but you train at 45 minutes to an hour. The rest of your training you have to do on your own. You have to go home and practice everything you learned if you ever want to achieve those goals that they have. And the normal U.S. martial arts people don't achieve that because they don't go home and practice 7 hours. You know that.
That's right. And I think that's the difference on it, too. We got just a couple more minutes left. And, you know, the thing that I think you and I try to approach it, I've seen you and I learn from you, Gunny, every single day, every single time that we are together. I see the way that you approach life. And I think it's very similar to that martial arts training where you approach life full on, head of steam every single day, where you're essentially training to be a better person every day. And, you know, you lift me up and guide me in the right direction. And I want to say thank you to you, Gunny, for your sacrifice to this country, for leading us, young men and women, showing us what it's supposed to be like, how to live life, and how to give back to our brothers and sisters. That means a tremendous amount to us. And you're really guiding light for us. And we can't say thank you enough from the bottom of our hearts.
Well, you can't give up. And you know, when I first met you, I told you some of my background, my medical condition. In 1999, 2000, I was given 6 months to live because of my cancers from Agent Orange.
Right.
And I said, no, that's not going to ever happen. I went through all kinds of treatments, all this and that. I lived through that. Then I had problems with my spine. I told you that. I was in my wheelchair when I saw you, but I get to walk on my Canadian crutches and my crutches sometimes. But, you know, they told me I'd never walk again, too. Well, you know what? It's your mental stability and what you want to accomplish and how long you want to function. I mean, I could have gave up and curled up in bed in 1999 and 2000 as with the treatments I went through, but I didn't.
Well,
I think I had a lot to do in my life.
You're right.
A lot to do in my life and helping other veterans that were in the same situation or worse than me. Plus, I had a family. But you know what? You know, my family, I love my family, but sometimes, and my wife tells me the same thing, sometimes you go overboard. I said, no, there's no thing as going overboard. I said, you either do something 150% or I won't do it at all.
Well,
that's how I am.
I can't agree more. And, Gunny, that's a perfect place for us to call it a day. That 150%. Hey, listeners, give it your all. Give it your all every single day. Thanks for joining us here on the Honor Across Arms podcast. Gunny, I appreciate you taking the time out, brother. Thank you so much for your service to this country and sharing your stories with us here on the Honor Across Arms podcast. Catch us next.
All right, buddy. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon, man.
Absolutely, sir. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Line over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums coming everywhere, so prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware, we'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there, over there.